Facing criminal charges, the first question that most people ask is, how do I find the right criminal lawyer? And that's a crucial question because the attorney you choose could be the difference between a favorable outcome and a tough road ahead. Hi, I'm Joel Chorney, a criminal defense attorney in Tucson, Arizona. In this video, I'm going to break down how to hire the right criminal lawyer step by step so you can make an informed decision and feel confident that you have someone truly fighting for you. So let's get into it. But first, a quick disclaimer. This video is for informational purposes only and does not create an attorney-client relationship. Laws vary by jurisdiction, so if you're outside of Arizona, consult with an attorney licensed in your state. Okay, so the first step is figuring out exactly what kind of lawyer you need. So that depends on the type of crime that you're facing. Not all lawyers handle the same types of cases. For example, if you're facing a DUI, you don't necessarily want a lawyer who only handles white collar crimes or vice versa. Different cases have different considerations. Sex offenses have very unique considerations. Homicides have very unique considerations. DUIs are actually quite specialized. There's a lot of scientific information that a lawyer who defends DUIs needs to be comfortable with. So you want to make sure that the lawyer you are researching actually has the necessary experience to handle the type of case that you are facing. You want to look for someone with the experience in handling cases like yours. The next consideration is the jurisdiction. Laws vary by state and even by city, but mostly by state. So if you have a case, say, in California, you don't want to get a lawyer in Arizona, unless that lawyer in Arizona happens to be licensed in California. But generally speaking, you want to look for lawyers that are local to your case. If we're not talking about differences between states, but instead talking about differences between counties, the further your lawyer is going to have to travel for your case, the more expensive it likely will be. In addition to that, if they're not usually in that jurisdiction, they're not going to have the advantage of knowing the players, the judges, the prosecutors, how things work in that particular jurisdiction. And so there might be a disadvantage there. There could be good reasons to want to hire a lawyer outside of that environment. But generally speaking, all else being equal, you're better off with a lawyer who regularly practices in the jurisdiction that your case is in. Bottom line is you need someone with experience in the right type of case and knowledge of the local legal landscape. Once you know what you need, it's time to research. And so there are a bunch of different resources available to research attorneys. There are online directories such as websites like Avvo and FindLaw, and they can help you narrow down options. You can get a list off of that. The go-to these days is Google. You can Google looking for lawyers, and if you do, you should pay attention to the overall trends in the reviews that the lawyer has received, not just one or two outliers. As with all things, you'll find that one really strong negative review probably is more of a reflection of the person leaving the review than it is of the actual lawyer. But if the lawyer has generally positive reviews, that's a good sign. And of course, if they have a lot of reviews, that also is a very good sign. The other source you want to rely on is personal recommendations. Ask people you trust. Firsthand experiences are often the most valuable. And if you know someone who has had a positive experience working with a lawyer, that makes a big difference. And chances are that they are, in fact, a good lawyer worth having a conversation with. And then, of course, often it's the case that finances are an issue. And if that's the case, check out your local legal aid services. They might have lawyers who volunteer their time or other resources to help people who are facing criminal cases but don't have the money to hire a lawyer. What you want to do is you want to make a short list of the lawyers with good reviews, relevant experience, and a solid reputation. And then you're going to work off of that short list. Now that you have the short list, let's narrow it down. What do we do to narrow down the list? Well, you got to ask yourself, how long has the attorney been practicing criminal law? The longer they've been practicing, the better the chances that they know what they're doing. But also, it is likely that they will be more expensive because they have the experience to back up their price. Another question is, have they handled cases similar to yours? And what were the outcomes? You want to find that out. Do they specialize in a specific type of criminal defense? If the answer is yes, and that type of criminal defense is the type that applies to you, awesome. If the answer is no, then maybe you want to look for a different lawyer. One of the most important questions is, are they licensed to practice in your state? A Google searching for lawyers in your state will likely yield the right kind of lawyers, but you still want to check because Google doesn't always get it right. You don't want to waste time talking to a law practice that is not licensed to handle your case. It's important that you not forget to trust your gut. How they communicate with you matters. Are they responsive? Do they explain things clearly? Do they seem interested in your case? Or are they just trying to rush you along? Are they just going to treat you like another case? This is important. I had a client once tell me that I'm like a tattoo and that you get what you pay for. Yes, you can save a lot of money depending on who you hire, but what you end up not saving on is the quality of the representation. So just because it's cheap doesn't mean it's good. But also conversely, just because it's expensive doesn't mean it's good either. You want to make sure that you are seeing the value that the attorney is bringing to the table, and that what they are charging seems justified based on that value. Okay, so now that you have the very short list, you want to, maybe you've even narrowed it down to the lawyer you think might be the lawyer for you. What you want to do is you want to figure out if they are in fact a right fit for you. And the way you're going to do that is by scheduling a meeting with them. You want to sit down for a meeting with the lawyer, and you want to be prepared for that meeting. Bring any documents related to your case and be ready to answer questions. You're going to want to ask them if they've handled cases like yours before. You're going to ask them what strategy for defending you they have. You're also going to ask how often will they update you on your case and what the potential costs of the case are. Yes, there's the cost of hiring the lawyer, but there may be other costs like hiring an investigator or hiring an expert, perhaps getting transcripts or other products or documents that will be helpful in the defense of the case. So you want to find out about that ahead of time. If the lawyer doesn't give you the impression that they're going to be updating you regularly, and that's a problem for you, you want to know that. Some people don't want to be updated that often. Some people want to be updated more often. Depends on what you're comfortable with. You want to find a lawyer who can give you what you need to be comfortable. I want to point out a few red flags that you should be on the lookout for. If you're talking to a lawyer who promises you a specific outcome, that is a huge red flag. That's a problem. No one can guarantee results in criminal law. And ethically, at least here in Arizona, and I imagine this is true in every state, a lawyer is not allowed to promise a specific outcome and is certainly not allowed to guarantee a specific outcome. So I've told people many times in meetings where they're talking to me and they want me to promise them an outcome, I tell them I cannot do that. It is unethical for me to do it. And if you end up talking to a lawyer who does promise you an outcome, run. That person is not playing above board. Another red flag is if the lawyer dodges your questions or doesn't seem clear about their strategy. If that's the case, that's probably the way it's going to be to work with them, and you don't want to work with someone like that. So I would encourage you to walk away and find a lawyer who is going to actually tackle your questions and explain what it is that they envision for the strategy of your case. Remember that a consultation is not just about them assessing you and your case. It's also about you assessing them. It's as much for your benefit as it is for the lawyers. All right, so the next part is understanding the costs. Hiring a criminal lawyer is an investment, so you need to understand the costs up front. There are different ways that lawyers can structure their fees, and so I'm going to run through those different ways now. The most common way in criminal context is a flat fee. The lawyer will say, look, I will take on this case and take you on as a client for X amount of dollars. And that amount is the amount that is owed to the lawyer, regardless of how the case is resolved. And at least the way I do it is if I charge a flat fee, I tell the client that it's kind of a gamble because I certainly could have it happen, and I have had it happen, that I think a case is going to require a certain amount of effort and resources, and it ends up requiring a whole lot more than that. And I tell my clients, I'm not going to charge you more because I did not properly quote your case. Similarly, if the case resolves very easily, much more easily than expected, then there's no entitlement to a refund. That's not how the structure works. However, if it is unreasonable for, at least here in Arizona, if it is unreasonable for the attorney to just pocket the money, then some money should be returned. For example, if I were hired on a homicide case and I charge, let's throw out a number out there. Let's say I charge $100,000. I'm not saying that that's what I would charge, but just for round numbers. Let's say I charge $100,000 for a first-degree murder case, and within 2 days, the state dismisses the case because they came up with new evidence that shows that my client could not possibly have done the crime, and the case gets resolved in a couple of days. And there's no conviction, there's nothing else. It would be unreasonable for me to just keep that money. Realistically, how much work could I have possibly put into that case in the course of 2 days? Even if I'd worked the full 24 hours each of those days, my hourly rate could not possibly justify keeping $100,000. So there would be money coming back to the client in that situation. So that's with flat fees. The other way that a lawyer could charge is by charging an hourly rate, where the lawyer says, look, I'm going to work on your case at a rate of $450 an hour. And they'll send you a bill on a regular basis. It might be monthly. They'll send you an invoice for the hours worked. That is more common in complex cases where it's just really hard to assess how much effort is going to go into a case. It's particularly common in white collar cases, but I would say that in the broad scheme of things, it is rare to do hourly billing for a criminal matter, but it's not unheard of, and it is allowed. Another way to handle the fee, which is particularly rare, I don't know any lawyers who do it this way, but it's by charging what's called a retainer, where the lawyer charges a certain amount of money up front and then draws from that money as they work on your case. It is rare in criminal cases. This is much more common in civil cases. In the criminal context, I haven't met many lawyers who like to engage in this arrangement, but that's an option. One other note on fees that I want to point out is that it is very common. It's not a red flag. It's not something to be worried about if the lawyer carves out what's called a trial fee. So what a lawyer could do is a lawyer could just charge the flat fee for the case, regardless of whether it goes to trial or not. I used to do that myself, but what I found is that it was common for my clients to not be very satisfied at the end of the case, particularly when we didn't go to trial, because they feel like they paid for something that they did not get. Although the outcome was a good outcome, they're happy with the outcome, they felt like they spent more money than they should have. And so what I started doing, and I still do it to this day, is I tend to carve out a trial fee, which is a certain amount of money that is only due to me if my client exercises their right to take their case to trial, which is their right. They get to do it. But the idea is that if they're thinking of trying to reach a non-trial resolution and we get to a point where they no longer want that non-trial resolution, they want to go to trial, then they're going to need to pay me an additional fee to tie me up for that trial. And the reason is that when I'm in trial, that's all I'm doing. I'm not touching anyone else's cases while I'm in trial. I'm only on that task, which means I'm effectively shutting down my practice. In order for that to be financially feasible, I need to be compensated so that I can just close down my practice and dedicate the time to the single client. And so I charge a trial fee for that purpose. And so that's something that is common, and you're likely to encounter that if you're ever in the market for a criminal defense attorney. Bottom line is that you should not be afraid to discuss the fee structure and any additional costs like court fees or expert witnesses fees or anything like that. Transparency is key. And if a lawyer is cagey or uncomfortable discussing their fee structure, that's a red flag. They should have nothing but comfort discussing how it is that they're going to be charging you and why. Okay, so now it's decision time. You've done your research, you've had your meeting with the lawyer. Now it's time to decide if that's the lawyer for you. Did they seem knowledgeable and confident? Did they listen to you and seem invested in your case? Did you get a good feeling from them? Are you comfortable with their communication style and their approach? Did you feel like when they were talking to you and explaining things, they were actually making things clearer, or were they making things more confusing? These are very important questions because at the end of the day, not every lawyer is suited for every client, and not every client is suited for every lawyer. It's a relationship. It could be potentially a very intimate professional relationship. You're going to be confiding in this lawyer, putting your life in their hands. So you want to be comfortable. And similarly, the lawyer wants to be able to work with you. And so although I mentioned that the consultation is about you assessing them, they're assessing you too. If you go in and you have an attitude, or you are disrespectful to the practice, or you act as though you're entitled to the lawyer's time before you've even hired them, those are red flags for the lawyer on the lawyer's perspective. And some lawyers will just not work with you. Other lawyers will jack up the price to give you the privilege of working with them. So be mindful of that being respectful and appreciative of the lawyer's time can go a long way, really can. At the end of the day, it's all about trust. And so you want to make sure that you've hired someone that you trust and that you feel confident in that decision. Okay, so what can you expect after hiring the lawyer? Once you've hired your lawyer, here's what should happen next. They're going to start building your defense strategy, gathering evidence, and reviewing facts. You are entitled to see disclosure in your case, and your lawyer should be happy to let you see it if that's what you want. A lot of my clients, they don't need to see the disclosure. They trust me to look at what's there and then to relay to them what it is that we're finding. But I at least have an online portal so that my clients who are not in custody, they can access the portal and they can look at the disclosure that I received and put up there. And so I like having that portal because it allows me to be in regular communication with my clients in a way that is confidential and secure, and it gives my clients a place to keep the documents for them to review. The other thing that's going to happen is that the lawyer is going to be sending you regular updates and clear explanations about where the case stands. For me, it's very important that after every hearing, I have communicated to the client what happened at the hearing and what we can expect to happen before the next hearing, or now that we've had the hearing. And what I tell my clients is that they should never go more than a business day without getting a response from me if they reach out to me. So you want to make sure that the lawyer that you've hired is going to receive your communications and respond to them in a timely manner. If the case goes to trial, the lawyer that you hired is going to prepare thoroughly and outline exactly what it is that you should expect. A good criminal defense attorney isn't just someone who knows the law. It's someone who stands with you through the process and fights for you on every step of the way. And so that's who you're looking for. So if you're facing criminal charges and need an experienced criminal defense attorney in Arizona, give my office a call at 520-581-4196 or visit my website, chorneylaw.com. If you found this video helpful, please hit like and subscribe and drop a comment below if you have any questions about hiring a criminal lawyer or navigating the legal system. I'm Joel Chorney. Stay safe, stay informed, and I'll catch you in the next video.